This story is a fictional narrative inspired by real-life emotions and everyday experiences. Have you ever believed love would sweep you into a fairy tale, only to discover the first page was written with a curse? This is my story, Lily's story. It started with a romantic kiss in Las Vegas and ends, well, I still don't know how it ends. But on my very first night at my husband's family home, I understood something. The paradise he promised might just be a private hell made for me. I thought I was walking into a fairy tale. After our quick, dreamy wedding in Vegas, Jacob, my new husband, drove me back to his family's cute little cabin in a small Ohio town. The car rolled down a tree-lined road, him driving with one hand and holding my hand with the other. "Just wait, Lily," he said, his voice warm and full of promise. "We're going to have such a peaceful life. The backyard is huge, kids can run around, and we'll sit on the porch drinking coffee, watching them." My heart was fluttering, light as a baby bird leaving the nest, full of hope and pictures of a perfect little family. I squeezed his hand, feeling like the luckiest girl on earth. Then the cabin door opened. The smell of pine wood and furniture polish hit me right in the face, and standing in the doorway was Heather, Jacob's sister. Jacob had told me a lot about her, a strong, capable woman who took over running everything after their mom had health problems and retired. In my head, I pictured a kind big sister type. "Heather, this is Lily, my wife," Jacob said excitedly, giving me a little nudge forward. Heather stepped up and opened her arms. The smile on her lips was wide, but it stopped right there. I leaned into the welcome hug, and my whole body went stiff. It wasn't a hug. It was like being pressed against a dry, rigid piece of wood. Her hands gave my back two light, lifeless pats and then let go immediately, like she was touching something fragile or dirty. But what really made my blood run cold was her look. Heather didn't look into my eyes. Her gray-blue eyes traveled a path from the top of my head down to my feet, then swept back up and stopped in a weird way on my face. They lingered so long I could hear the ticking of the wall clock in the living room. That look held no curiosity or friendliness. It was inspection, measurement, like a buyer checking if the item they just purchased had any scratches. Under that gaze, I suddenly felt completely out of place, totally different from everything in that house. The welcome dinner for the new bride happened in the formal dining room with a long wooden table. Jacob's parents, Robert and Diane, nodded hello to me with careful smiles. Jacob's 12-year-old son, Ethan, just sat silently at the far end of the table, eyes glued to his phone, not moving a muscle. But Heather was the one running the show. She kept bringing up old stories about the American girls Jacob used to bring home. Her voice was sharp, deliberately loud in the quiet room. "Oh, that reminds me, Jacob," Heather said, cutting a piece of steak as if just talking to him, but everyone could hear. "Remember that Sarah you used to date? She was so good at business. Has her own company now, right? Nice family, good background." Jacob gave an awkward laugh. "Yeah, that was a long time ago." I looked down at my plate, feeling like my throat was being squeezed. A few minutes later, Heather started again, glancing at me. And then there was Jessica, bought her own house at 25, so independent, so strong. Her parents even gave her a car when she graduated. Every time a name was mentioned, my heart clenched a little more. I wasn't Sarah. I wasn't Jessica. I certainly wasn't the well-connected Amanda she mentioned next. I was Lily, an immigrant girl from Asia, with a normal accounting job and a small family far across the ocean. Under Heather's gaze and tone, I felt like damaged goods, being unfairly and scornfully compared to the name brands that came before. After eating, I quickly got up to clear the plates. "Let me wash these, Diane," I said, trying to sound natural, just wanting an excuse to escape the suffocating room. Down in the kitchen, I let out a sigh, my hands trembling as I turned on the faucet. The warm steam calmed me down a little. Then suddenly I felt a breath on the back of my neck, ice cold. I didn't even have time to turn around before a voice, sharp and cold as a knife, cut through the sound of the running water. Each word was clear and stabbed right into my ear. "And I hope you're not a gold digger." I froze. My blood seemed to stop. Heather's voice continued, low but full of threat, each syllable dropping like a cold stone. "Our family, since my great-grandfather's time, worked our fingers to the bone to build what we have. Don't get any ideas." Crash. The porcelain plate in my hand slipped and fell straight into the metal sink. letting out a loud, jarring clang, almost shattering. My heart pounded. I saw spots. I spun around, my palms wet with cold sweat. I only had time to see the stiff, straight line of Heather's back as she walked out of the kitchen. That walk held no hesitation. It was chillingly cold, as if she had just completed a necessary task, issuing a warning. That night, in the strange bed of Jacob's childhood room, I lay completely still. Next to me, Jacob was sound asleep after the long, tiring day, breathing evenly. And me? Tears just silently spilled out, soaking the pillow. Every word, every look from Heather played on a slow-motion loop in my head. I suddenly understood a cruel truth. The paradise Jacob promised me, that picture of kids running in the yard, might just be a curtain hiding a hell I'd willingly walked into. And me, the naive girl who believed in fairy tales, was now alone, facing a war I'd never been warned about. Have you ever tried your absolute hardest to fit in, only to realize you're turning into a joke in someone else's eyes? My first few weeks in that cabin taught me that lesson in a way that was painful and humiliating to my very core. After the shock of the first night, I told myself I had to try harder. I was the new one. I had to prove I was useful. When I saw the family's diner, the homestead, right in the town center, always packed, I offered to help Heather. "Heather, can I help out at the diner? I waited tables in college," I said, pushing down my hesitation. Heather was sitting, going over the books. She looked up. Her eyes swept over me from head to toe. Then she gave a slight nod and a thin paper-like smile. "Fine. We need the help. It's good you're willing." My heart lightened a little. Maybe things would get better. Maybe I'd misunderstood. The next morning, I wore my simplest clothes and got to the diner early. Heather was already there in a crisp black vest, hair in a neat bun, looking like a high-end hotel manager. She handed me a thick, rough apron and a pair of yellow rubber gloves. "You can start with cleaning, Lily," she said calmly. "The customer bathrooms need attention every hour. Then the kitchen floor, it must always be grease-free, and the recycling pile out back needs to be sorted properly. The kids do it sloppily." I was stunned. Not taking orders, not serving, not handling the register, just cleaning. I nodded, swallowing the bitter disappointment. "You have to earn your keep, right?" I tried to reassure myself. But that work was torture. The strong, acrid smell of cleaner mixed with the indescribable smell of a public bathroom hit my nose and made me want to gag. The hot water, chemicals, and constant scrubbing made my hands, used to keyboards, turn red and raw. My back ached after each time I bent over to wipe the kitchen floor, a sticky, grimy mess of grease and a grit that Heather insisted had to be scrubbed by hand to be spotless. And she was always there at the right moment. Every time I stood up to stretch my aching muscles, that tidy figure would appear. Heather would walk over, stare at the patch of floor I'd just cleaned, and give a slight shake of her head. Her sharp voice would ring out, loud enough for nearby staff to hear. "Lily, you missed a spot here. Look, there's still grease." She'd point, her face showing disappointment. "You Asian girls don't seem used to this kind of manual labor, do you? I guess that's to be expected." The words felt like a knife to the heart. I could only bow my head and silently pick up the rag to redo the spot, while my back was soaked with sweat and dirty water, my hair a mess. I felt small, dirty, and completely out of place among the delicious food smells and customer laughter from the dining area. The physical exhaustion I could take. But the mental pain is what really drained me. I knew I needed to connect with Ethan, Jacob's cold, closed-off 12-year-old son. He was an important part of my new life. One afternoon, I tried my hardest to bake a batch of chocolate cupcakes, the kind I thought any kid would like. I brought them out, smiling my brightest smile. "Ethan, I made these. Want to have some and play a game with me?" The boy was watching TV. He glanced at the plate, then at me. His blue eyes held no emotion. "I'm not hungry," he said shortly, then stood up and walked straight upstairs, leaving me standing there with a plate of warm cupcakes. I sighed and took the cupcakes to the kitchen. Just as I reached the doorway, I heard whispering. Heather was in the kitchen, bent down to Ethan's level. He'd run in there. Heather's voice was soft, fake sweet, but in the quiet of the late afternoon kitchen, every word reached my ears clearly. "Your mom is your real mom, Ethan. I know you're sad. Her voice dropped, full of meaning. "That Lily, she's just a stranger. She's only being nice because she wants to replace your mom and take all your dad's love. Don't be fooled." I stood frozen behind the door, my hands trembling as I held the plate. I saw Ethan's small back shudder slightly. Then he nodded, a small, gloomy nod before running off. My heart ached. Heather wasn't just isolating me. She was poisoning a child's mind. My patience started to crack. But I still tried. I made an apple pie using their family recipe, even though I wasn't used to it. It might not have been perfect, but I made it with care. And then one evening, the thing that turned my shame into a slow-burning fire of anger in my chest finally happened. I was thirsty and went downstairs for water. Light from the living room spilled into the hallway. I heard Heather's voice, talking on the phone, full of fake warmth and real contempt. "Mom, I can't believe how foolish Jacob is," she said with a dramatic sigh. "Bringing home some tiny, immature Asian girl. I really don't get it. Yesterday I had her try to make apple pie. Oh my God, the pie she made was soggy, way too sweet. It's pathetic, Mom. She just has no roots, you know? The culture is completely different. How can she possibly fit in?" I stood rooted in the dark hallway. My hand held the icy glass of water, but my whole body burned hot. Each word, each syllable, felt like a hot needle piercing my skin. My efforts to cook, my fragile hope to be accepted, it was all just a joke, a topic for her to gossip about and scorn. I silently went back to my room and closed the door. Leaning my back against the cold wooden door, I looked at my red, rough hands damaged by chemicals. I remembered Heather's mocking smile, Ethan's cold eyes, and that scornful voice from just moments before. In the darkness, the tears stopped. Instead, a burning, bitter feeling built up in my chest. I faced a harsh truth. In this place called home, every kind act, every sincere effort of mine was twisted and distorted into something malicious and lowly. I wasn't a family member. I was an outsider, a threat, a toy for them to step on. And I couldn't have known that all this shame and anger was just the beginning. The truly terrifying part, the thing that would make me understand what real hell on earth is like, hadn't even started yet. Do you believe in a coincidence that's just a little too perfect? The kind where you lose your most precious thing, and the person you suspect most just happens to find it in the place you'd least expect, making you look guilty to everyone? For me, that coincidence started with a ring. Not my wedding ring. It was my engagement ring, the only valuable thing my mom left me before she passed away. A small pearl ring with a thin gold band. It wasn't worth a lot of money, but it was all my memories and her love. I always kept it in a velvet box in my bedside drawer. One morning after cleaning my room, I opened the box. It was empty. My heart dropped. I knelt down, flipped over the pillows, blankets, sheets. I crawled under the bed, searched every corner. My hands shook, cold sweat on my neck. It can't be, I whispered in a panic. The noise caught attention. Heather appeared at my door looking concerned. "What's wrong, Lily? You look frantic." "Heather, my ring, the engagement ring, it's gone." My voice cracked, tears starting to well up. Heather sighed, her face full of responsibility. "Oh dear, that's terrible. This is our home. There can't be theft. Maybe you misplaced it. Let me help you look." She stepped in without waiting for my okay. Then she called out loudly, "Jacob, Dad, Mom, Ethan, come help Lily find her ring. It's important." In an instant, the whole family gathered in my small room. I felt suffocated and embarrassed. Heather started directing everyone like a detective. "Let's search systematically. Lily, check your purse. Jacob, look under the table. Ethan, check your bookshelves. Maybe it fell out there." It felt weird, but in my panic, I just followed. We turned the place upside down. Heather showed a suspicious amount of energy, opening every drawer in my dresser, lifting every item. "Not here," Heather muttered, looking thoughtful. Then she acted like she'd had an idea. Or maybe fell into the hallway and someone picked it up, thinking it was theirs. "Ethan, your room is closest. Let's just take a quick look in your dresser drawer." Ethan, already looking annoyed, mumbled, "But my stuff is—" "Just try, sweetie," Heather said softly, but with pressure, putting a hand on Ethan's shoulder and leading him to the next room. I stood at Ethan's door, filled with dread. Heather walked into his room, straight to his desk. She opened the top drawer, where he kept small toys and keepsakes. She rummaged for a few seconds, then suddenly stopped. "Oh, what's this?" All eyes went to her hand. Heather's thumb and forefinger pinched a small, glittering object, slowly raising it high. Light from the window hit the small pearl, giving off that soft, heartbreakingly familiar glow. It was my ring. The air in the room froze. Heather pretended to be surprised, looking at Ethan. "Ethan? Why is it in your drawer?" Ethan's face went pale like he'd been slapped. His eyes went wide, full of confusion and fear, then quickly turned into something else, something sharp and cold. He looked from the ring in Heather's hand to me, standing frozen in the doorway. That look, it wasn't just cold or distant anymore. It was pure hatred mixed with betrayal. "You!" Ethan shrieked, his voice full of tears and rage. "You snuck into my room! You planted it! You're a thief!" The accusation hit me like a hammer to the chest. My mouth fell open. I wanted to scream, "No, that's not true!" But my throat was completely blocked. No sound came out. I could only shake my head, my hands reaching out weakly as if to touch the ring, to touch the truth that was being twisted. I looked at Jacob. He stood there, his face showing deep tiredness, scrunched up like he had a headache. He looked at me, then at Ethan, shaking with anger, then at the ring. He said nothing, not a word in my defense. Just a heavy sigh escaped him. Heather spoke up then in a fake, soothing voice. "Ethan, don't be upset. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. Maybe Lily left it here and you accidentally put it away." But the way she said it, the look she gave me, made that defense worse than the accusation. From that day, everything changed. Ethan completely saw me as the enemy. The hateful look he gave me whenever he saw me sent chills down my spine. And Jacob started pulling away. He avoided private conversations with me. One evening after Ethan went to bed, he found me, his voice tired and a little distant. "Lily, you have to try harder with Ethan. He's young and he misses his mom, and just be more careful, okay? Don't let misunderstandings like the ring thing happen again. I'm really tired." Those words felt like a boulder on my heart. Misunderstanding. He used the word misunderstanding, but in his tone and his eyes, I saw clear doubt. He didn't believe me. The husband I thought was my support was now standing at a distance, looking at me with the suspicious eyes of an outsider. I fell into a state of numbness. Until one morning, intense nausea hit me. My period was over 2 weeks late. A new fear mixed with a fragile sliver of hope sparked. Maybe this was it. A baby? A new thread to connect us? To save everything? I secretly went to the pharmacy and bought a test. Hands shaking, I waited in the bathroom. 2 clear pink lines appeared. A flood of mixed emotions hit me. Joy, fear, confusion. But above all, in that moment, I thought of Jacob. This baby could be our last chance. He'd be happy. The family would have to accept me. I had to tell him right away. Holding the test stick, heart pounding, I walked downstairs, heading for the kitchen, where I heard Jacob and Heather talking. I was about to open the door when Heather's voice stopped me in my tracks. Her voice was calm, full of fake, analytical concern, but every word was poison. "Jacob, I really didn't want to say this, but I've been worried. I suspect she got pregnant on purpose." I stood frozen. The blood rushed to my face, then drained away, leaving me icy cold. Jacob sounded surprised. "Why would you say that?" "Just think about it," Heather said, her voice lowering, full of fake intimacy. "Things are so tense. You two aren't even close lately." And then suddenly, plus, look, the motive is so obvious. To tie you down so you can't think about leaving. And more importantly, for the inheritance later. You know, girls from other places, especially developing countries, they use this trick all the time. They see kids as a guaranteed ticket. I held my breath, my whole body rigid. I waited. I waited for Jacob to argue, to defend me, to defend our baby. A deadly silence stretched on for what felt like a century. Then I heard Jacob's heavy, troubled sigh, and his next words made my whole world collapse, my blood feeling like it froze in my veins. "I've been a little worried too, honestly, really worried. Let me think about it some more." Clatter. The pregnancy test fell from my hand onto the carpeted floor without a sound. The 2 pink lines were still there, mocking my naivety. I didn't cry, I didn't make a sound. I silently bent down, picked up the test stick, turned around, and walked slowly, heavily back upstairs. I went into my room and locked the door. I sat on the bed, my hands cradling my stomach. The baby inside, my last hope, the tiny light I thought could pierce the darkness, was now, in their eyes, possibly the very weapon Heather would use to push me into the abyss, to paint me as a scheming, lowly person in my own husband's eyes. The despair now wasn't hot. It was a bone-deep cold, a numbness to my very core. I stared into the dark room. What do I do? Sit here and take it, letting them suffocate me and this baby, or... Have you ever been pushed onto a stage where every spotlight is on you, every word is an attack, and you can only stand there, silent, while your heart is being torn to pieces? The night after finding out I was pregnant and hearing that conversation, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, staring at the dark ceiling, feeling like an invisible hand was squeezing my heart and lungs. The next morning, I dragged myself up like a ghost. I still got dressed, went downstairs to the kitchen, then to the diner. I didn't know why I was going. Maybe out of habit, stupid obedience, or a blind hope that things would be different. The atmosphere in the diner that morning felt strange. Heather stood behind the cash register, but her eyes followed me everywhere, like a cat watching a mouse. I was assigned to wipe tables. My hand shook, my mind was blank. I picked up a rag, bent over to wipe table 7, where a family had just left a few sticky soda rings. I reached for a half-empty glass a customer had left, meaning to take it to the kitchen. But my hand, already icy and trembling, slipped. Crash! The glass hit the tile floor, shattering completely. Water and ice cubes flew everywhere, soaking my pants and shoes. The sharp sound made everyone in the area turn and look. I bent down, frantically picking up the shards, my palms sweaty and cold. Sorry, everyone, I stammered. Right then, Heather's sharp, almost gleeful voice cut through the space. It was loud, clear, and deliberately meant for all the staff and nearby customers to hear. Oh, for heaven's sake, look at her! I looked up. Heather had stepped out from behind the counter, hands on her hips, staring at me with a mix of anger and contempt. All thumbs, can't do a single thing right. I'm telling you all the truth. She turned to the staff who had stopped working. Bringing a useless person into the family just adds to the burden. Can't cook Western food, can't clean properly, only good at being a freeloader. Every word felt like a hot needle, piercing through my skin, burning everything in front of me. Blood rushed to my face, a hot, burning feeling. My temples throbbed. I bit my lower lip hard, the metallic taste of blood spreading in my mouth, but I didn't feel the pain. My throat was tight, dry. I couldn't make a single sound to defend myself. I looked around. The waitstaff, the cooks, a few regulars having breakfast, they were all looking at me. Some eyes were curious, some held a flash of pity, but most showed disdain, coldness, and even nodding agreement. Heather had succeeded. She had painted the picture of a freeloading, useless person, and was now publicly hanging that picture up for the world to see. I turned around, ignoring the broken glass at my feet, ignoring the stares drilling into my back. I walked straight out the door, leaving behind Heather's soft, triumphant scoff and the terrifying, complicit silence of everyone else. Walking home on the empty street, I felt smaller and more alone than ever. The cold Ohio wind blew, but it wasn't as cold as the ice inside me. I held my stomach, where a tiny life was growing, and wondered what kind of world I was bringing this baby into. Back in my room, before I could even catch my breath to calm down, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my father-in-law, Robert. I swallowed hard and answered, "Hello, Dad." "Sure." "Lily!" His voice roared through the phone, deep and furious, no greeting. "What is wrong with you? What did you do at the diner this morning? You upset Heather, you made her angry. It affects her work mood and disrupted the whole restaurant. Do you know the diner is this family's livelihood?" My mouth fell open. I wanted to explain, but Dad, Heather was the one who... "You be quiet." He cut me off. "I don't want to hear it. You need to know your place. You're the newcomer. You need to learn to fit in, not cause trouble." Before I could say anything else, my mother-in-law Diane's voice came on the line, replacing Robert's. Her voice was gentler, but full of iron, wrapped in velvet. "Lily, honey, listen to me." She sighed like she was coaxing a naughty child. "Our family needs harmony, understand? Heather has a place in this house. She's managed everything for years. You're new, you're young. Just apologize, okay? Go apologize to Heather. Just one apology, and everything will be fine. The family will be happy again. Do it for us, for Jacob, honey." I thought my heart stopped. My head buzzed. The person who was wronged, publicly bullied, was being told to apologize to the bully? The sheer injustice and twisted logic made me dizzy. I couldn't speak. I just stayed silent. Diane clicked her tongue and hung up. I slumped on the bed, the phone still pressed to my ear. The world around me blurred. Everyone was against me. Everyone. There was only one person left. One last, fragile thread of hope. I waited for Jacob to come home. I waited until night when he walked into the room, face tired after a day's work. I stood up, took a deep breath. I had to speak. I had to tell him everything. He was my husband. He had to understand. "Jacob!" My voice trembled. Tears had already welled up. I told him everything, from Heather publicly humiliating me to the pressuring phone calls from his parents. I told him, my voice choking, about the loneliness, the humiliation. I didn't do anything wrong. Why are they treating me like this? You have to say something. You have to stand up for me. I looked straight into his eyes, begging for fairness, a bit of empathy, a glimmer of love and responsibility. Jacob stood there, looking at me. His face was tense, dark circles under his eyes. He looked at me for a long time, as if weighing something, struggling with something inside. My heart pounded in that deadly silence. Then he sighed, a heavy sigh full of exhaustion and annoyance. "Lily," he said, his voice dry, "just apologize to Heather, okay?" I stood there, turned to stone. The blood seemed to stop flowing in my body. He continued, avoiding my eyes. "She's family, she's my sister. In our family, peace is the most important thing. If we give in a little, it'll pass. I'm I'm just so tired of all this, you know? I'm just so tired of all this." That final sentence was the killing blow. All the love, trust, and hope I had for him, the man I once saw as my safe harbor, shattered in that moment into sharp pieces that turned back and shredded my heart. The tears stopped. All that was left was a coldness deep in my bones, a terrifying emptiness. I was wrong. He wasn't my support. He wasn't my protector. He was the weak, convenient bridge that Heather used to walk in and destroy my life step by step. He chose the fake peace, chose his original family roots over his wife and unborn child. He turned away, taking off his jacket as if the conversation was over. I still stood there, motionless. That night, after Jacob fell into the deep sleep of someone who had just solved a problem, I sat up by the window. Cold moonlight shone into the room. I looked at the simple wedding ring on my finger. It sparkled lifelessly. Then my hand rested gently on my stomach, still flat but now holding a life. A cold, clear, and determined thought flashed in my mind for the first time, wiping away the shock and pain. If I can't rely on anyone to protect me, not even the man called my husband, then I have to protect myself. I looked out the window toward the main house, where Heather was sleeping soundly with her victory. And Heather, you picked the wrong person to bully. Your one-sided game ends here. Have you ever been in your deepest despair and suddenly remembered a place called home? A place where just thinking about it makes you feel warm and peaceful, even if it's far across the ocean. After Jacob's crushing words, I silently ended the call. Without another word, I turned and walked, step by heavy step, up the stairs. My feet felt like they were walking on cotton, numb. I went into my room, closed the door, but didn't lock it, and collapsed on the bed, eyes wide open, staring at the dark brown wooden ceiling. I didn't cry anymore. My tears seemed used up. My whole body just felt a strange numbness, like someone had pulled all the nerves out of me. I felt cold, even though the room was warm. I curled up, hugging a pillow, but it gave no comfort. My hand reached for my phone on the nightstand. I opened the photo app, scrolling mindlessly. The screen lit up, shining pictures of a bright, distant, heartbreaking past right into my face. Photos from mine and Jacob's wedding celebration in Vietnam. A small, warm party in my aunt's flower-filled garden. In the pictures, I'm in a white ao dai. Jacob in a suit, both of us smiling like sunshine. Surrounded by my mom, my aunt, close friends. Everyone was laughing, hugging me, blessing me with eyes sparkling with happiness. My mom held my hand, her voice echoing in my memory. "My daughter, be happy over there, okay? Be strong." Looking at those beloved faces, my throat tightened. The numbness began to melt, replaced by a stabbing pain. I missed home. I missed the smell of jasmine in the garden, my mom's loud laughter, the home-cooked meals that seemed so far away now. I couldn't hold back any longer. I dialed my mom's number. The phone rang 3 times, then her familiar, warm voice came from the other end. "Hello, is that you, Lily?" Just hearing those 4 words, my tears suddenly poured out like a waterfall, soaking the pillow. I bit my lip hard, holding back a sob rising in my throat. I had to sound normal. I couldn't make her worry. "Yeah, it's me, Mom." My voice was hoarse. I tried to brighten it. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine. And you? Your voice sounds strange. Is everything okay, honey?" My mom is very sensitive. "No, it's nothing, Mom. I just miss you, that's all," I said, each word breaking. I'm fine. Everyone is good to me." I lied. I knew I was lying blatantly. But I couldn't tell my mom about the disdainful looks, the public accusations, the betrayal and loneliness here. She would be heartbroken. She wouldn't sleep. I chose this path. Now I had to walk it alone. We talked for a few more minutes, all empty questions about health. I tried to laugh, tried to sound cheerful. When I hung up, I felt more exhausted than ever. Calling home didn't soothe the pain. It just made me realize how far from home I was, and how much of myself I'd lost here. The night grew deeper. Gnawing hunger started to torture me. I realized I hadn't eaten since lunch. My stomach with the baby inside was growling. I hesitated. Going to the kitchen in the middle of the night, what if I ran into Heather? But the hunger and worry for the baby won over the fear. I quietly opened my door and crept down the dark stairs like a cat. The kitchen was dim, just the nightlight on. I was about to open the fridge to look for some milk or bread, but I stopped. On the kitchen table under the dim yellow light was a bowl of plain rice porridge. A little steam still rose from it, giving off a simple, warm smell of cooked rice. Next to it was a spoon and a small folded note. My heart ached a little. I walked over and picked up the note. It was Jacob's handwriting, hurried and a little messy. "Now eat this and I'm sorry." I stood there, holding the piece of paper, looking at the simple bowl of porridge. Mixed feelings washed over me. A little warmth because he still thought of me, knew I was hungry. A little bitterness because this apology was too small, too late, and too clumsy compared to everything I'd been through. It didn't erase the words that shattered me, didn't fix the broken trust, but it softened my heart for a moment. I sat down and ate spoonfuls of the warm porridge. It was bland, but it was the only warm thing I'd had all day. As I ate, I wondered, what will my life be like? Forever waiting for reheated, lukewarm porridge and clumsy apologies after each hurt, each betrayal, stuck in this endless cycle of endurance and humiliation? I looked down at my stomach. No, I can't. This baby doesn't deserve to grow up with a mother who only knows how to endure and wait for pity. The next morning, I woke up with a completely different determination. I was still tired, still sad, but a small flame had been lit inside me, the flame of self-defense. I came downstairs later than usual. Heather was drinking coffee at the table. Seeing me, she frowned, giving me that familiar look of contempt. "Oh, look who decided to join the land of the living. Almost noon." Her voice was sour. Every other time, I would have bowed my head, walked past silently, or stammered an apology. But not today. I stopped. I slowly turned to face Heather. I looked straight into her arrogant gray-blue eyes. My breathing was even. My voice was calm, clear, not trembling at all. "Heather, I'm going to find a job outside." Heather, who was bringing her coffee cup to her mouth, froze. Her eyes widened, flashing with a moment of surprise, as if she couldn't believe her ears. I continued, my voice still calm, but full of weight. "I don't want to be a bother or affect your work at the diner anymore. From now on, you don't have to worry about me." Having said that, I didn't wait for her reaction. I turned and walked away, my steps firmer than ever, straight upstairs. Behind me was a stunned silence, the first silence I'd ever won from Heather. Closing the bedroom door, leaning against it, I let out a long breath. My heart was beating fast, but not from fear, from a new feeling, the slight thrill of taking back control. I looked out the window where the gray Ohio sky was getting a little clearer. The answer was clear in my heart. If you want others to respect you, first you have to stand on your own 2 feet. And that's where I'll start. Heather and this whole prejudiced family. Just wait and see. You're listening to Inner Echo Stories channel. Please like and subscribe for more interesting stories. Have you ever felt like you're running really fast, trying to escape a shadow, only to realize that shadow has been clinging to your own footsteps, and the road ahead is suddenly full of thorns? Telling off Heather was just the first step. Standing up with words is easy. Standing firm with actions is the hard part. I sat in front of my old laptop, full of determination but also worry. I went on job websites, part-time, near town. But my resume was thin. No American degree, work experience was just waiting tables in college and cleaning bathrooms at Heather's Diner. The distance from this isolated suburban house to where the jobs were was also a big problem. Jacob knew I was job hunting. One night he sat down next to me, his voice gentle but worried. "Lily, you're pregnant. Just stay home and rest. I can take care of you." He put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture meant to comfort. I turned to look at him. In his eyes, I still saw tiredness and a fragile hope that I'd just listen so things could be peaceful. I took a breath. "You can take care of the money, Jacob. You can pay all the bills," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But you can't fix the feeling of being useless, looked down on, seen as a freeloading burden in my own home. I need a job, not just for money. I need it to breathe." Jacob looked at me, his eyes complicated. He understood, but maybe he didn't truly grasp the depth of that pain and determination. He sighed and nodded slightly. "Okay, but don't overdo it." Then, after a few failed interviews, I got a call. Small coffee shop called The Daily Grind in the next town over, about a 20-minute drive away, needed a part-time barista for morning shifts. The pay wasn't great, but it sounded friendly over the phone. I said yes immediately. It was my first life raft. Those first few days of work, I felt alive again. The air in the coffee shop smelled like fresh beans. There was soft music and customers with quick, friendly chats. No one knew who I was. No one looked at me with inspecting or scornful eyes. There I was, just Lily, a new, hardworking employee. My hands learned to make lattes and cappuccinos. The feeling of working, of being paid fairly, made my long-battered self-respect start to come back piece by piece. But Heather didn't just let me be. I knew that from the atmosphere at home. She became colder, and the whispered conversations between her and Diane became more frequent. One day, I accidentally overheard a snippet from the living room as I walked down the hall. Heather's voice, full of fake hurt. "See, Mom, I told you, she doesn't see this as home. Won't help with family work, runs off to work for someone else, clearly has no intention of sticking around, just sees this as a temporary stop." And Diane, voice full of worry, "Really? That's so sad, honey. You've tried so hard." Well, now let me talk to Jacob. The pressure went on Jacob and finally landed on me. One evening, after a silent dinner, Jacob pulled me out to the back porch. He ran a hand through his hair, his face tense. "Lily," he said, sounding exhausted, "maybe quit the coffee shop job?" My heart sank. "Why? I'm doing really well there. Mom and Heather, they talk a lot." He avoided my eyes. "They say you're doing this to pull away from the family, that you don't want to be a part of it, that it's causing a split. I'm getting tired of hearing it. Why don't you come help at the diner with me? I'll talk to Heather, tell her to go easier on you, okay?" I stood there, the cold night wind blowing through me. His offer sounded reasonable, like a compromise, but to me it was a sweet trap. Going back to the diner, under Heather's direct control, with his vague promise of going easier. I'd been there. I knew how that would end. I realized something scary. Even if I tried to run outside, my own independent feet were still tied by an invisible rope to this family's whirlpool of control and prejudice. Jacob, whether he meant to or not, was the one holding the other end of the rope. "Let me think about it," I said, my voice flat, then went back inside. I didn't promise anything. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual to get ready for work. I wasn't giving up yet. I walked out to the back parking area where the old Honda Jacob bought for me when we first got married was parked, and I froze. My two driver's side tires, the front and the back, were completely flat. They weren't just low on air. They looked like two sad, limp pancakes hugging the rims. My heart hammered. I bent down to check. On each tire, right where it met the ground, was a cut. Not a natural tear or nail puncture. It was a clean, straight, sharp cut, like it was made on purpose with a knife or something sharp. One cut like that would have flattened it, but someone had cut another tire, making sure I couldn't go anywhere. The blood rushed in my ears, but a cold chill ran down my spine. I turned to look at the house. The back door opened, and Heather stepped out, holding a mug of coffee. She looked at me, then at the two flat tires, and a faint, barely there smile touched her lips. "Oh, my." Her voice was cold, not a hint of surprise. "An old car, and you don't even take care of it. Driving around at night so much, you must have picked up nails. Lucky you didn't have an accident on the road, or else..." She didn't finish her sentence, took a sip of coffee, turned her back, and walked into the house, leaving me standing there with two slashed tires and a new, sharp, icy fear rising in my chest. I looked back at those clean, violent cuts. This wasn't a random nail on the road. This wasn't an accident. Everything up until now, the mean words, the public shaming, the mind games, suddenly seemed to fade. For the first time, a horrifying, spine-chilling thought flashed in my mind, clear and full of threat. Is this fight not just about words and mind games anymore? Have you ever felt your own body become the final alarm bell? When your mind is too exhausted to scream anymore? When the stress isn't just a fuzzy feeling anymore, but turns into a sharp pain, a bright red warning that everything is past the limit. After the tire slashing, I lived with a low hum of fear. Every strange noise at night, every glance from Heather, made my heart jump. I still went to work. Jacob helped me fix the car. But the air in the house was like a guitar string stretched so tight it was about to snap. My body started to react. One morning, as I was getting ready to go downstairs, I felt a small cramp in my lower belly and a strange wet feeling. I ran to the bathroom, a small bright red spot of blood on my underwear. The world dropped out from under me. I panicked and called Jacob. He was at the diner, heard my voice, rushed home, his face white. He drove me straight to the nearest emergency room. The hours in the hospital were a nightmare. Ultrasounds, tests. The baby's heartbeat was still there. That tiny, strong sound was the only thing holding me together. Finally, the doctor, a middle-aged woman with serious but kind eyes, sat down to talk to us. "The baby is currently stable," the doctor said, and I breathed a small sigh of relief. But her voice turned stern. "But you have light bleeding due to extreme stress. Your body is sounding the alarm. Prolonged stress at this level can be genuinely dangerous for both mother and baby." She looked right at Jacob. "As the husband, you need to ensure your wife has a quiet, supportive environment. She needs rest, relaxation, and to be kept away from all pressure and conflict. This is medical advice." Jacob nodded over and over, his hand gripping mine, cold and clammy. "Yes, doctor, I understand. I'll handle it, I promise." On the drive home, he was silent, his face tense but determined. "I'm going to talk to my parents and Heather," he said, his voice full of pressure. "That's it, enough. You and the baby are the most important now." I believed him. In that weak moment, I wanted to believe in this last bit of protection from the man I'd given my whole life to. That night, Jacob went into Robert's study where Heather was also present. I sat upstairs, heart pounding, a fragile hope in my chest. But only 10 minutes later, a roar from downstairs made me jump out of my skin. "How dare you talk to your father like that?" It was Robert's voice, the sound of a fist slamming on a table, then a groan. "Oh God, my heart, my heart." The house exploded into chaos, the sound of running feet. Heather's panicked scream, "Dad, Dad, call an ambulance, hurry!" I ran down the stairs, legs wobbling. Jacob was kneeling next to Robert, whose face was pale, clutching his chest, breathing heavily. Diane was sobbing. Heather, eyes red and furious, turned to look at me and Jacob, her voice full of tears and rage. "If anything happens to Dad, it's your fault." She pointed right at us, but her gaze lingered longer on me. "It's her! It's this childish wife you brought home bringing trouble to this house. This family was never like this before." The ambulance came. Once again, the whole family rushed Robert to the hospital. Me, just back from the hospital with a warning about my baby's health, now sat in the cold waiting room of another hospital, worried about my father-in-law's health. The painful irony was suffocating. After a long wait, the doctor came out and said Robert had an angina attack from extreme anger and needed to stay in the hospital for observation. Diane hugged Jacob, tears streaming, her voice full of despair and blame. "Do you see now? Do you see?" She clutched Jacob's hands, shaking. "This family can't take any more stress. Your father is old. His heart is weak. I'm begging you, please, think about your father's health." She turned to look at me, her eyes full of apology, but also immense pressure. "Lily, you understand too, don't you? Now, both you and Dad need peace and quiet. A house with 2 sick people, isn't good." She hesitated, then let out the suggestion as if it had been prepared. Maybe for now, you should take Lily back to Vietnam for a while, to rest and have the baby there. Let things calm down here, let your dad recover, and Lily can be taken care of by her own family. Wouldn't that be better? The hospital hallway seemed to freeze. The cold white fluorescent light shone down on the tired, stressed faces. I stood there like a statue, a cold chill creeping from my feet all the way to my head. I looked at Jacob. He was stuck in the middle. On one side, his father in the hospital because of an anger he'd partly caused. On the other side, his exhausted, pregnant wife and unborn child. His eyes were full of conflict, pain, struggle, and in that look I saw a flash of hesitation, a consideration of that temporary suggestion. That moment of hesitation, even just a flicker, was the final, crushing blow to my heart. It tore apart every last shred of my trust and hope. He was considering sending me away, shipping me back to my country like an unwanted, troublesome package. All the sound around me faded. Diane's crying, the beeping of machines, the footsteps of medical staff. Everything blurred. All that was left was the image of the man I loved being forced to choose, and he was leaning toward the side without me. My heart shattered into icy pieces. But strangely, from the wreckage, a different flame burst to life. Not tears, not despair, it was a fire of absolute rage, cold and clear-headed. A clear voice rang in my head, louder than all the chaos. And I cannot be the one who is sent away. I cannot let them decide the fate of me and this baby like unwanted goods. If I have to leave this place, I have to be the one to walk out. And if I stay, I have to stay in a completely different way. A way that makes them afraid, not pitiful. I looked straight into Jacob's eyes. My gaze wasn't pleading or pained anymore. It was a terrifying calm. He flinched, maybe seeing the change in me. The real fight was just beginning, and this time I wouldn't be the victim anymore. Have you ever had to stand in front of someone you love and say the hardest things, not to hurt them, but to save yourself and what you hold dear? That's what it felt like when I sat down to talk with Jacob after things had calmed down a bit. Robert came home from the hospital after 2 days. The doctor was clear. It was a severe spike in blood pressure from the anger, not a heart attack, but he needed to keep calm. The house was like a silent battlefield. Heather whispered as she cared for her dad, throwing me looks like daggers. Diane was gloomy and avoided me. And Jacob, he moved through the rooms like a tired shadow. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. That night, after everyone had gone to their rooms, I called him out to the back porch. The Ohio night air was cold and clear, but my chest was burning. Jacob, I started, my voice strangely calm. No shaking, no choking up. We need to talk. He looked at me, eyes tired and guarded, like he was waiting for more tears or another fight. Go ahead. I took a deep breath, the air making a little white cloud in the cold. Jacob, I love you. I truly love you. And I know you have feelings for me too. I looked right into his eyes and saw him flinch a little. But love isn't enough. Love can't be a bandage for wounds that get torn open every single day. Jacob opened his mouth to say something, but I raised a hand, a gentle but firm stop. I can't live like this anymore, I said, each word clear. Me and this baby inside me, we need safety. Not a fuzzy feeling of safety, but a real physical and mental space, where I don't have to wake up scared of a mean comment or worried about my tires. We need protection, not cold apologies after each hurt. I saw Jacob's throat move. He understood. For the first time, he was really listening without interrupting or making excuses. So what do you want? He asked, his voice rough. I don't want anything vague from you anymore, I answered. I'm giving you 2 choices, clear, specific, and you will decide. I slowly laid out each option like I'd practiced in my head 100 times. 1. We rent a small apartment and live on our own. It can be in this town or the next one over. You can still visit your parents anytime, still work at the diner. I'm not asking you to cut off your family. I'm just asking for a separate, safe space for me and the baby. A place where Heather doesn't have a key, can't walk in and start her performance. I paused, watching his reaction. His eyes were wide, surprised by how clear and mature this suggestion was. 2. I continued, my voice still steady. I will go back to Vietnam to have the baby. There, I have my mom, my family, support that doesn't come with contempt and plotting. You can come visit us anytime you want, and after the baby is born, we'll figure things out. I went quiet, letting those choices hang in the space between us. This wasn't the plea of a victim waiting to be rescued. This was the proposal of an adult, a soon-to-be mother, taking back control of her and her child's life. Jacob looked at me for a long time. The yellow light from the house lit up the stress and shock on his face. I saw in his eyes now something more than just tiredness or hesitation. Something new, respect, and maybe a little fear. He realized the naive, trusting girl he married was gone. In front of him was a woman, with cold, sharp eyes and a steel will, putting the fate of this relationship in his hands. He let out a long, heavy sigh. He looked down at his own hands, then back up at me. Option 1, he said, his voice low but clear. I choose option 1. We'll find a place of our own. A wave of relief, but not joy, washed over me. This was the first step. But I knew the real fight was just beginning. And it was. The next morning, when Jacob announced our decision to his parents and Heather in the living room, a real storm broke out. Heather reacted the most violently. She jumped up, her face red, voice screeching. What? What did you say? Dad just got out of the hospital. He's not well, and you dare talk about moving out? She pointed straight at me, her eyes wide with hate. It's because of her. She's tearing this family apart. She doesn't want you near your parents, near your sister. She wants to isolate you so she can control you. Diane burst into tears, grabbing Jacob's hand. Jacob, honey, you really want this? Leaving your old parents here? We're a family. Robert, still pale, sat in his armchair, not daring to get angry for fear of his blood pressure, but his look at Jacob was full of disappointment and anger. You listen to your wife over your own parents now? Jacob stood in the middle of the storm, his face pale but his jaw clenched. He looked at each of them, then looked at me. I was standing silently in the corner, watching it all. Maybe my calm, firm image right then gave him strength. I'm not abandoning you, Jacob said, his voice trembling but holding steady. I'm just moving out. I'll still come over every day. But Lily and your future grandchild need a better environment. The doctor was clear. This is my decision. His announcement added fuel to the fire. Heather was almost hysterical. But Jacob stood his ground. For the first time, he really stepped out of the shadow of blind obedience. I watched the scene. My heart wasn't bitter or scared anymore, just a cold clarity. Heather had lost the first round of this new phase, but she wouldn't stop, and neither would I. The journey to reclaim safety and respect had just begun, and it would have many rough turns ahead. Sometimes freedom doesn't come with a big, bright victory. It comes in an empty room with the smell of fresh paint and a quiet that's worth more than anything. We moved into the small apartment in just one day. It was on the edge of town, an old two-story building with a few rental units. Ours was on the first floor. Just one bedroom, a small living room combined with a kitchen and a bathroom. The furniture was old stuff bought from thrift stores or brought from the cabin, mostly my things. The space was cramped, the old wooden floor creaked, and the living room window looked out onto a parking lot. But to me, it was heaven. For the first time in months, I could take a deep breath without feeling choked by prying eyes or tense air. Here, there was no Heather appearing suddenly behind me. No poisonous whispers. I could open my own fridge, cook simple meals I liked, sometimes Vietnamese food, sometimes trying a new recipe. The smell of food filling the small apartment was the smell of freedom. I cleaned too, not public bathrooms or greasy kitchen floors. I wiped my own windows, vacuumed the old rug, organized my bookshelf. Every small action brought a strange sense of peace. And I signed up for an online course to finish the last credits for my accounting degree. In the evenings, when Jacob worked a late shift at the diner, I'd sit with my laptop, lost in numbers and principles. It gave me a goal, a future beyond these four walls and the family drama. The most significant and surprising change, though, came from Ethan. At first, he was still cold. Jacob would bring him over on weekends, and Ethan would usually sit silently in the living room, playing games on his phone. But gradually, in this small, quiet space, away from Heather's constant presence and whispering, a different Ethan started to appear. One Saturday afternoon, I was baking chocolate chip cookies. The sweet smell filled the air. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his nose twitching slightly. I didn't invite him. I just put a plate of warm cookies in front of him. "If you want," I said softly. The boy looked at the plate, then at me, hesitating. Then he picked one up and took a small bite. A light flashed in his eyes very quickly, then faded. "Good," he said, his voice tiny. After that, Ethan's visits became more frequent. He started bringing his homework over, sometimes asking me a math question. We watched cartoons, sometimes played simple board games I'd bought at a thrift store. He was still quiet, but the tension, the defensiveness in his eyes and his posture had lessened a lot. Then one day, while we were putting together a puzzle, Ethan suddenly looked up at me, his voice full of confusion. "Aunt Heather, she said a lot of things about you." My heart clenched a little, but I stayed calm and didn't interrupt him. The boy looked down at the puzzle pieces and continued, his voice getting smaller. "She said you just want Dad's money, that you're not sincere, that you'll leave." He paused, then added a sentence that made my heart ache. "But you're not like that." In that moment, I could have easily badmouthed Heather, told him everything she'd done to me. But I looked into the confused blue eyes of a 12-year-old boy, a boy who had lost his mom and been fed poison. I didn't want to become another Heather. I took a deep breath and said in the calmest voice I could, "Ethan, sometimes people say things that aren't true. Not because they're bad, but because they're scared or sad or they don't understand everything. What's important is that you look with your own eyes and feel with your own heart. And you can always ask me or your dad anything." Ethan looked at me, didn't say anything, just gave a small nod. But I saw a flash of relief on his face. A fragile bridge had been built. However, Heather didn't leave us alone. Our silence and independent life seemed like a huge insult to her. One afternoon, when Jacob was at the diner and Ethan at school, I was studying when I heard furious, rapid knocking on the door. I looked through the peephole. Heather stood there, her face red with anger, her hand clenched around her purse. I knew this would come. My heart raced, but this time, not from fear, from cold determination. I picked up my phone, turned on the video camera, and placed it gently on a shelf near the door, angled to capture the doorway and anyone outside. Then I opened the door just a crack. "Heather," I said, my voice flat, not trembling at all. "You!" Heather nearly screamed, her breath smelling of coffee and rage. "You think you've won? Pulling Jacob out of the house, poisoning Ethan. You're a home wrecker, a family wrecker." She pointed her finger right at my face. Before, that action might have made me step back in fear, but not now. I looked straight into her eyes, my voice clear, slow, and loud enough for the phone's microphone to pick up. Heather, this is my home. I did not invite you. Your insulting language and threatening behavior at my doorstep is harassment. Heather's mouth fell open, like she couldn't believe her ears. She'd never seen me like this. I continued, still with that terrifying calm. If you don't leave right now, I will call the police. And I have plenty of evidence, including this video, of you insulting and threatening me, both at the diner and here. I tilted slightly, letting my gaze and perhaps the phone's lens point straight at Heather's face, which was turning pale. The change on her face was incredible. The anger was quickly replaced by shock, then a flash of fear. She realized I was no longer easy prey. I had learned to use a weapon she didn't expect: the law, confidence, and a phone with a camera. You dared, Heather stammered, but her voice had lost all its power. I dare to protect my home and my safety, I said, my hand already on the doorknob, ready to close it. You have 3 seconds to leave. 1, 2. I didn't even need to say 3. Heather turned on her heel and walked quickly, almost ran to her car, her walk stiff and furious, but no longer triumphant or threatening. I closed the door and locked it carefully. My hands were shaking a little, but it was the shake of excitement, of a real small victory I'd won myself. I picked up the phone and stopped the recording. I didn't plan to use it unless forced, but it was there. A shield, a warning. Heather had tried her last trick of direct confrontation and it had failed. I leaned back against the door, a small smile touching my lips. This small step proved one thing: I had learned to stand up. And the next lesson would probably be how to move forward. Life is never a straight line, and people who hurt you can also become weak. The question is, how will you choose to face that moment? On a rainy afternoon, Jacob's phone rang. Diane's panicked voice came through the speaker. Jacob, your dad fell on the stairs. I don't know what to do. Heather's in the city. Come home now. Jacob, who was fixing the kitchen sink, went pale. He looked at me, his eyes full of conflict. Between his injured father and the pregnant wife he'd promised to protect from all family trouble. I put down the dish towel. My heart still bore scars from their words and actions. But I looked into Jacob's frightened eyes. I let out a breath. Go now, I said, my voice flat and firm. Your dad is important. Call if you need anything. Jacob looked relieved of a burden, quickly hugged me, and ran out the door. I stood watching his taillights disappear in the rain. My heart wasn't in turmoil. I knew I was doing this not to win anyone over, but because it was the right thing for one human being to do for another. Afterwards, I went into the kitchen. I took out a small chicken, some rice, onions, ginger. I cooked a pot of Vietnamese chicken porridge, simple but warm and good for someone who's sick. I cooked it not with passionate love, but with the care of someone who knows the value of health and warmth. I put the porridge in a thermos without any note and gave it to Jacob when he came back to grab a few things. For your dad, I said simply. Jacob nodded, his eyes grateful and a little guilty. Silence was the strongest message. I didn't need their thanks. I was just showing them who I am and how I act, regardless of how they've treated me. Robert was brought home after being checked out, luckily with just a light sprain. Jacob told me later, sounding relieved. Dad took the porridge. He didn't say anything, just nodded. Mom thanked me. No apology, no public regret, just another silence. But this time it wasn't the silence of contempt or ignoring. It was the silence of someone thinking, acknowledging something they couldn't easily put into words. Heather still avoided me, bitter, but her shadow no longer haunted every corner of the house. We had established a clear boundary. They were still Jacob's family, but they were no longer the conductors who could direct my life and emotions. It wasn't a glorious victory. It was a realistic balance, full of cracks but solid enough to stand on. Time passed, my belly grew. I finished my course, receiving my college diploma in the mail. I held the diploma, tears streaming down my face. It was small, but it was something I had built completely on my own in this foreign land. Then on a warm spring day, when the last of the snow had melted, my daughter was born, a tiny, healthy baby girl who cried with a fierce life force that lit up the whole delivery room. Jacob hugged me, his tears falling on my shoulder, his voice choked, thank you, Lily." 2 days later, as I sat in my hospital bed feeding my baby, there was a soft knock on the door. Diane and Robert walked in. They looked awkward. Diane was holding a small gift wrapped in light blue paper. We came to see the baby, Diane said softly, her eyes not daring to meet mine for long. Robert stood behind her, nodding, his face still serious, but lacking the fierceness from before. Congratulations. They placed the gift on the table and stood there for a moment, looking at the baby in my arms. Diane's eyes softened. They didn't hug or kiss, didn't say sweet words, just their presence and acknowledgement. Heather didn't come, and I didn't expect her to. After they left, Jacob cradled our little daughter in his arms. He was clumsy, awkward, but on his face was a pure happiness I hadn't seen in a long time. I sat there, leaning back on my pillows, watching father and daughter. A strange peace filled me. Not the perfect happiness of a fairy tale, but the peace of someone who has weathered a storm and now knows they can handle any weather ahead. I smiled, a gentle smile, with none of the shyness or fear of that new bride from before. I don't know what the future with my in-laws will be like. Maybe there will always be a distance. Parties with thorns hidden under the tablecloth. Heather probably will never change, but I know, from now on, I won't be afraid. I watched Jacob trying to soothe our little girl, and his eyes found mine, full of love and a little remorse. I learned how to stand firm on American soil. Not by leaning on a wealthy family, not by my husband's protection, but through my own resilience, strength, and wits. I found my voice again, and more importantly, I found the strength to protect it. My daughter breathed evenly in her father's arms. The hospital room was quiet. And maybe that's the biggest, most costly, but most valuable lesson of a marriage far from home. Before you expect a paradise from someone else, you have to build your own fortress. And from within that fortress, you can choose, love, and live by your own strength. My journey isn't over. It's only just beginning as a mother, as an independent woman. And this time, I'll write my own story.